Hello and welcome to the Creators Guild podcast. I'm Chris Howell, and with me,
Jared Lovelady.
and we're here to talk about all things creative. And we're going to start off as usual. We're going to jump into another chapter of A Flight from Shadows. And once again, your episodic reminder, if you have not gone out and gotten your copy of A Flight from Shadows, you should go do that. And if you do have a copy and you haven't reviewed it yet, you should go do that too.
Yes, please do. We need the reviews.
Yes, always. More reviews is always good.
Yeah, even bad reviews.
Yeah, but if you really don't like it, like we said before, leave us a good review anyway, and then tell us what you don't like about it. Okay. Chapter 28, To Train a Gladiator. Cycle of Rio, year 12-182. She was incredibly intelligent, full of drive and ambition, yet always willing to teach those who were genuinely curious, without regard for their station. We never could have suspected the destruction she would unleash on our world. Memories of Duridim, Radivance, royal page to the queen. Tora and Athandra made their way through the sea of people and servants to an oblong table near the head of the banquet hall of the bronze palace. Large round tables dotted the room, each set in pristine Paramese fashion. Gold and silver scrollwork round its way around lace-trimmed scarlet cloths. High-backed chairs with velvet cushions that matched the tablecloths in color and embroidery circled each plate. Circled each table. Plates of fine porcelain, which alternated between house colors of red and green, were flanked with finely worked silver cutlery. Crystal glasses adorned each place setting, one filled with chilled water, the other waiting to be filled with one of the many choices of fine wines and assorted punches that would be served. Tall plumes of palm fronds, fern leaves, and sprigs of locally grown red dianthus flowers adorned the centerpieces of each lavish table. Alkari serving staff in red and green livery, complete with House Duridim crest on their right breast, navigated the tables, carrying all manner of drink to those waiting to be served. At a nearby raised table sat Baron Umari, along with Premier Corvin, Vice Chairman Duran, Narvosh Bertrand, and a small host of minor elven nobles and human aristocrats. "Welcome, ladies," Graythan said, rising as they approached, gesturing with a rather large crystal goblet toward the two empty seats at his side. "Please join us. I apologize in advance for the humble fare. I'm afraid the kitchens of the House Bronze Palace can only manage so much." He shook his head forlornly, clenching a desperate fist over his heart. Tuara smiled at his sarcasm, sliding into the waiting seat next to him, Athandra following suit. "Thank you, Master Graythan," Tuara said. "It all looks so splendid. I'm looking forward to seeing what vintages you have to offer this evening. I thought I saw blue nightberry being served as I came in. A glass of that, after such an exciting display this afternoon, would be a truly pleasant way to unwind." Aiden sat across the table from Tuara and offered her a smile as she sat. "I am anxious to taste the delicacies provided," he said. "Although this is the home of the Vice Chairman, Master Bertrand has personally selected the dishes to be served this evening. He is quite traveled and only allows the very best to be served." There were others at the table, apparently familiar with Master Bertrand. They expressed their agreement at Aiden's assessment. "Do you share his love of cuisine?" Graythan inquired. "Oh, indeed. Although I am not nearly so experienced as Master Bertrand, I have traveled all the western regions of Parom and visited 7 of the 8 great cities. This is my first opportunity to visit Glen Heights. I have heard many good things spoken about local fare. I look forward to sampling a bit of everything this evening." "I feel the same way, Master Aiden," Tuara intoned. "Only my passion involves sampling delectable wines." There were chuckles around at the table, and a few glasses were raised in Tuara's direction. A bell sounded from the far end of the room, and a voice called out to the waiting company. "My lords and ladies and gentlemen, the first of many courses. Please enjoy." A set of double doors opened at the end of the room, and a flood of liveried servants entered, carrying trays of small bowls and plates. There was a mixture of both Alkari and Paramese from local houses. They spread across the room and began placing dishes in front of each diner. The meal was exquisite. The courses were small, served in golden bowls or silver-worked porcelain. Each was filled with just enough to sample a few bites, perfect portions to keep oneself from filling up too quickly. 12 courses had been served so far, and the serving men and women in their white robes continued to bring more. Tuara had sampled everything and relished the variety of foods proffered, although she hadn't recognized a single dish. How many more courses are there? Tuara asked Graythan. If they bring many more, I think I may burst. But they are all so delicious. I have heard of one setting directed by Master Bertrand where 30 courses were served, Graythan replied. 30? Tuara stared at him in astonishment. You cannot be serious. How could anyone eat 30 courses? It is his passion, after all, Aidan replied from across the table. He smiled as the next dish was placed in front of him by a serving girl. I vow to sample whatever delectables are placed in front of me this evening, even if it is 100 courses. A pungent, peppery aroma rose from the small bowls. They contained pieces of fish with a thick, dark sauce, accompanied by a second bowl with steamed rice. Is this one of the local dishes, Graythan? Aidan inquired. I do not recognize it. Before an answer could be given, he happily scooped a combination of fish and sauce onto his spoon and brought it to his mouth, closing his eyes in apparent anticipation of another savory flavor. He had just begun to chew when his eyes popped open and his face went red. Tears streamed down his cheeks and his hands searched the table frantically, knocking his goblet over in his blind groping. Tuara stared at him in astonishment, along with the others at the table. Aidan began to cough and splutter, gasping for air. By the gods, is he choking? Graythan exclaimed. Someone help him, get him a drink, and slap him on the back, quickly, came other voices, and hands grabbed him from either side. Slowly and without warning his breathing settled, and someone placed a cup in his hand. He gulped frantically as the liquid overflowed his lips and ran down his chin. He brought the cup down on the table like a hammer and took deep, deliberate breaths as small coughs racked his body. As his breathing settled, he looked up to find all eyes on him. The group was silent, and members of the table were all on their feet. A liveried man was holding his left arm, and the woman to his right held his other arm and was gently patting him on the back. Are you quite all right, sir? Asked the liveried man in a lilting Paramese accent. I think so, Aidan stammered. By the goddess, I have been poisoned. Where is the third servant who brought that dish? It was one of the serving girls. She must have tried to poison me. Did anyone see where she went? He was looking around the dining hall frantically. Come now, surely you do not think you were poisoned? Said the woman, still rubbing his back and trying to calm him. Why would anyone want to poison you? You are right, he exclaimed, turning to face her and seizing her by the shoulders. We must stop everyone from eating the fish. It must all be poisoned. Gasps rose from around the table. Tuara joined others in dropping utensils to clatter in the bowls or on the table. Aidan rose quickly and took a step back, knocking over his chair. The fish? The woman asked, concern painting her face, as she took a step toward him and rested a hand on his arm. Yes, the fish, with the dark sauce. I only ate a spoonful. If I had eaten more, I would likely be dead. Why are you smiling? This is serious. Did you feel burning in your throat and up into your nose and eyes? Asked the woman calmly. Yes, but... He trailed off in puzzlement at laughter coming from the woman. She chuckled wryly, shaking her head as she spoke. It is called Cordova. It is a very potent spice in the sauce. It is not meant to be eaten a spoonful at a time. Her laughter deepened. I thought you really were dying. Thank the goddess, we are facing nothing more than heavily seasoned fish. The others around the table and those watching the exchange began to laugh, softly at first. As the explanation spread around the dining hall, gales of laughter rang out from all around. Tuara looked at the spicy sauce and covered her mouth with a cloth napkin as laughter escaped her. Aidan's face reddened, but then he joined in. The woman hugged him tightly around his waist and threw her head back in bright, musical laughter. Oh, young man, you are quite entertaining. Who needs gladiators when there is one such as you? She asked, settling her mirth and wiping moisture from her eyes. I am pleased you are not dying. But come, I will sit beside you and protect you from any vicious victuals or nefarious nourishments that may be placed in front of you. She had an arm around his waist and pulled him back toward the table. Still laughing, she helped him to his to set his chair straight and took the chair beside him as he sat. Several liveried Alkari began cleaning up the mess he had caused, and people made their way back to their seats. Many were still laughing, and several people glanced his way, giving him a nod or raising a glass toward him. He did not look around, instead focusing on the woman who had helped him. She was looking at him intently and had placed her chair very close to his, one hand looped in his arm. You have truly never eaten Cordova? The woman asked sincerely, her eyes bright with mirth. I have never had anything like it, Aidan replied. I do not know how you are able to eat it. You are meant to take a small portion of fish and sauce with the rice, just enough to get the flavor. I am surprised that you have not experienced it before. Have you not been to the southern isles of central Brundia? They have such spices there that would make you weep just to smell them. Tuara smiled at the exchange. She turned to Athandra, who had her face hidden by her napkin. Her shoulders shook, and she was struggling profusely not to look at Aidan. Tuara heard a snort come from behind the makeshift covering. Athandra, Tuara spoke quietly, leaning in close. No, my lady, Athandra managed between soft snorts. She rose to her feet, suddenly her face a mask. If you will excuse me, she said to Tuara. Not waiting for a reply, she turned quickly, bringing her napkin up to her face as she swiftly walked away from the table. More snorts and muffled tittering followed her as she strode away. Athandra eventually returned, only occasionally letting out a random soft snicker when Aidan was not looking in her direction. Tuara used her elbow to surreptitiously assist Athandra in getting herself under control more than once. Thankfully, the courses ended at 17. The final course was a rich, sweet custard with small, exotic berries Tuara had never seen. They come from high in the mountainous coastal region of northern Perome, Graythan explained when Tuara inquired about the origins. They are very delicate and difficult to ship. Bertrand must have spent a fortune to acquire enough and have them specially transported for the dinner. As dishes were removed, Bertrand rose from his seat at the raised table in the front of the hall. My friends, he said conversationally, I hope you have all enjoyed the various cuisines presented this evening. A cheer rose from around the room, with many glasses raised and hands slapped against tabletops. Bertrand bowed slightly to the appreciative room before continuing. My selections came from my vast travels to all corners of Duradim. With only one near casualty this evening, I will gladly call the dinner a success. Laughter followed his comment, and Bertrand raised a glass in Aidan's direction, placing a hand over his heart as he smiled at the younger man. Aidan returned the gesture good-naturedly. Now, Bertrand stated, his tone becoming more serious, as he strode from the table to take a position more conducive to instruction. We have dined together and enjoyed pleasant company, yet we are here for more than just pleasantries. On display today were the very best clutch of gladiators ever produced in all of Perome. I say this proudly, yet not without merit. You are all anxious, I am sure, to learn more about our splendid gladiator Alandar. I will help you understand why he is so very special, and why these gladiators are so very effective. He strolled as he spoke, making small circles. Tuara was impressed with his delivery. Even with his accent, he spoke in a storytelling way that made you want to listen. I trust each of you knows your history well. As you are aware, every 100 years or so there is a fighter who arises who is far superior to his peers. The greatest known in all our records are Fendel and Corrigan. Both were legends. As you also know, every fighter trained in the last 200 years is compared against these two. We have their statistics available. When you compare Alandar's to these legendary fighters, I have no doubt you will be awe-inspired. And when you review his pedigree, you will understand why. And what exactly is his pedigree, dear Bertrand? Came a voice from the group. The question was asked innocently enough, but Tuara could hear a slight hint of annoyance. It was Vice Chairman Duran. Graythan leaned toward Tuara. The Vice Chairman is second chair of the Okari Traders Guild. It is telling that even Duran does not know about Alandar. He is here today as a buyer, not in his official capacity as a guild leader. Tuara nodded in understanding, genuinely curious. All in good time, Vice Chairman, said Bertrand soothingly. All in good time. There is much to discuss with this one, and we wish all to understand why we have kept him a secret, even from our own beloved guild members. His public presentation will be a special event. We wish to take nothing away from that experience. Bertrand turned and signaled to the horse-faced attendant, who was waiting by a corner door. The man nodded and opened the door wide. Alandar, now dressed in blue and white silks that clung to his body more than covering it, strode into the room. The other 22 fighters who had been in the arena, followed him through the door, wearing similar attire. While they lined themselves up along the wall behind the raised table, Alandar walked to a position in front, where he stopped in a regal pose. Tuara marveled at his posture. He did not glance around the room, but stared blankly over the heads of the onlookers. Had she walked into the room at that moment, she would have thought him a statue. Narvash rose from the table and walked around to stand near Alandar. "My dear friends," began Narvash, "no doubt you will have many questions, not least of which concerns Alandar's pedigree, as our dear vice-chairman has already addressed. As you are all aware, our gladiators go through extensive specialized training in our guild house. The bucks begin their training very young, and after evaluation we determine their best traits and how to train them. With Alandar we have taken a special approach." He looked around at the group, making sure he held each of their attentions before continuing. "You are all familiar with High Lady Iskar, the matron of the Alkari birthing house and Doe training house in Skaroth." At the mention of the High Lady's name, a tall woman stood from the raised table near where Narvash himself had been seated. She wore a blue silk dress with gold embroidery around the hems and lace at the neck and wrists, and a short white vest with patterns of golden sunburst on the lapels. She, too, wore dark liner around her green eyes, and the tattooed scrollwork of a guild member on her cheeks. Her white hair was pulled into a tight bun on the back of her head that contrasted sharply against the amber of her skin. Her eyes were bright, and a permanent smile lifted the corners of her mouth, yet she advanced around the table as though expecting the onlookers to grovel at her feet. While no one went that far, the entire group gave measured bows of their heads in respect as she approached and paused beside Bertrand and Narvash. The two men inclined their heads and received the same acknowledgment from Lady Iskar. "We welcome the High Lady to our demonstrations today," Narvash intoned. "As I have said, Alandar's training is different from the other gladiators. He came to us from Lady Iskar's house 14 years ago. Given his lineage, the High Lady's knowledge of that lineage, and her most esteemed reputation, she has remained involved in his training. It expanded beyond that of a mere fighter. His physical abilities, coupled with the aptitude she rightly predicted he would possess, truly make him a prodigy. High Lady," he continued, turning to Lady Iskar and inclining his head once again, "if you would be so kind, I will allow you to elaborate." Graythan leaned toward Tuara again. "I did not recognize the High Lady. It is a rare occasion these days for her to leave Skaroth. It is very telling that she came all this way." "Who is she?" Tuara asked. "She's the matron of the Alkari birthing house in Skaroth. She's also the head of the High Council of Parom and the highest-ranking trade guild member. She also sits as a spiritual guide in the Saparans. To put it mildly, she is the single most powerful figure in all of Parom." Tuara looked back at the woman in shock. She was essentially the equivalent of the Kuvian queen, and here she was, sitting and having dinner at a trade meeting, as though she were a common business person. "I am most pleased to be part of this exchange," said Lady Iskar pleasantly, smiling at those seated around the room. She slowly turned and walked toward Alandar as she continued. "As Narvash and Bertrand have stated, and as Alandar himself has proven, he is most formidable. I am very pleased with what he has become." She looked Alandar up and down, reaching out a hand to touch him here and there, while she slowly circled him as she spoke, as though she were a teacher studying a piece of art, lecturing her students on its qualities. "You will notice Alandar's height and build. He is quite tall, even for an Alkari. He is very long-limbed in proportion to the rest of him, giving him additional advantage in reach, and yet he is not overly large-framed. Thus his own weight does not encumber him or slow him down." She paused in the circling to inspect the bandages that had been applied to Alandar's side. A scowl flitting across her face. She straightened, her pleasant smile returning as she stepped in front of Alandar to face the group and continue her lecture. "You see, my dear friends, while Alandar has a certificate of pedigree that includes such Alkari as Negan, Bask the Mighty, Tisra, and even Emuel, he is also of the bloodlines of both Fendal and Corrigan." She paused, giving a knowing look to those in attendance. "As much as I love my Alkari, and I enjoy training them, I made it my life's goal to breed the bloodlines just right to make another legend in my lifetime. I am confident that legend stands before us in this room today." There were some whispers in the crowd, and glances passed between buyers and advisors. Lady Iskar began her inspection of Alandar once again, this time directing him by touch to specific poses. "He is quite the beautiful specimen, lithe and lean," she continued, admiration clear in her voice. "He would be a beautiful dancer were there more coin to be had in that particular arena. His father and mother were both extraordinarily beautiful. I had thought one of them might have been the prodigy I was searching for. Alas, he took one more generation to arrive. Alandar's mother was tall for an Alkari female. While extraordinarily beautiful, she had a very powerful stature and was lithe and strong. His father was not a gladiator. Instead, he was raised to serve in a pleasure house, but he, too, had a formidable stature, with a perfect frame and proportions to be a fighter. It was his beauty that led the guild to train him for the pleasure house, a decision that, while lucrative, was another mistake of bucks only being raised by men and allowing themselves to think with something other than their brains." A chuckle passed through the crowd, and Bertrand choked on a wine he was sipping from a silver goblet. At a final touch, Alandar resumed a position of attention, and Lady Iskar turned again to face the group, her tone becoming all business. "My friends, Narvash and Bertrand do not speak lightly when they say Alandar is unique and has had special training." She stepped up beside the two men, including them in her statements with a wave of her hand. "We three have personally overseen every aspect of his training. We have developed a regimen unlike any previously given to an Alkari. While the majority of Alandar's training has been that of a gladiator, he has been given a full education in all other Alkari services, everything from pleasure house to the leather shop, from the toolmaker to the baker's assistant. He has also been instructed in the Skarathi upper schooling curriculum, receiving private tutoring in all things from science to mathematics to politics and history." There were some gasps at this last revelation. "Yes, we understand this is very unorthodox. We wanted to truly understand any limits he may have physically and mentally, and we have tried to push him as far as his limits would allow. What we have is not just a gladiator, but the most well-rounded, highly trained Alkari ever produced in any training house." There were some grumbles in the crowd, and a voice rose from one of the front tables. "We are here to buy gladiators, not to pay for your experiments. You cannot expect us to pay extra for your wasted efforts in training an Alkari unnecessarily." Tor recognized him at once. Aiden had pointed him out as Cyrus Koshravi, one of the largest wine producers in the Confederation of Brundia and the owner of multiple arenas in the western provinces. The Empire of Perham was bordered on the south by an inland sea, across which lay the Confederation of Brundia, a coalition of states and provinces known simply as the Confederation. Cyrus was the chieftain of this province. His house sigil was emblazoned on the right breast of his vest, the same symbol that had adorned the pauldrons of the gladiatorial executioners who had died at Alandar's hand. "Exactly so," called Lady Iskar in a tone that brooked no argument. "We are all here on business. No one expects you to pay for what will not profit you." "What is the point of this, then?" asked Cyrus, a mixture of curiosity and frustration clear in his voice. "The point, my dear Cyrus," said Narvash, stepping forward to face the larger man, "is that we have discovered something in training Alandar this way, something we have missed for all the years the guild has existed." He reached out to touch Cyrus's shoulder, staring at him intently. Cyrus stared back, and there seemed to be a tension in the room before the larger man nodded, and Narvash stepped away, continuing the discussion. "You have witnessed the fighters presented today." Narvash waved a hand at the gladiators who were lined around the dining hall. "All 22 passed their trials. When was the last time all fighters presented have done so?" Cyrus's face took on a stony mask as he looked at Narvash. "No, my friend, I am not asking you to give up bargaining position. I am asking in earnest. Do not answer, but think to yourself. Do you remember a trial with as many fighters of this caliber? While Bertrand and I claim to have the best training house in all the Empire, have we become so much better at training in the arena that all our fighters would show themselves this well?" The stoniness in Cyrus's face softened. From where she sat, Tawara could see the consideration in the man's eyes. Narvash turned back to the group. "You see," he continued, "what we have learned from Alandar we have used as a template these last several years. While Alandar is a unique specimen, his well-rounded training gives him an advantage. He is naturally a better fighter, but training in other areas allows him to read his opponents better, to understand his own limitations and the weapons he is using, and even be even more effective and efficient. All the fighters you see here today have had similar training to Alandar's. Not all the same, as the expense would be far too great, but they are much more rounded in their training, and as such are much better in the arena. And imagine how much more profitable each could be outside the arena. Some of you have commented, in jest, that you wish you could use your gladiators for more than just fighting, given the expense. Well, now you can. Properly trained gladiators can serve as a special treat in the pleasure houses, or they can assist in development of their own weapons and armor. We do not ask payment for unnecessary training, but offer additional return on each of your investments. Tuar could see heads begin to nod as the possibilities were considered. We do not recommend this type of training for all Alkari. That would truly be a waste. However, what we have learned with this group of gladiators in a specific set of combined training that makes our gladiators better fighters and more profitable in specific areas where they can be used outside the arena. He scanned the faces once again. That is what you will now bid on when you purchase Alkari from this guild house. The most well-rounded and specially trained gladiators in all the realms. And today you have the rare opportunity to witness the most highly trained, skilled Alkari ever created, and a descendant of legends. Tuar could see it in their eyes. He had won them over. The evidence of these fighters' skills was indisputable, and the added training would be a benefit to each of their houses. Even Cyrus gave a barely perceptible nod of approval in Narvash's direction. The mood in the room lightened, following Narvash and Bertrand's presentation. The Alkari fighters were instructed to spread themselves around the outskirts of the dining hall, so buyers could inspect them and ask questions without being overheard. The tables were cleared, and centerpieces were replaced with trays of fruits, nuts, pastries, and cheeses. Pitchers and casks of wines, juices, and meads of all varieties were also available to entice any palate. The discussions lasted for the next couple of hours. Some of the buyers walked away empty-handed, but 12 of the 22 gladiators were sold, and none expressed regret for having attended the demonstrations. Tuara, along with Graythan and Athandra, had the opportunity to speak with High Lady Iskar. Tuara found her fascinating. She had done so much, had accomplished so many things in her short human life, and had traveled to nearly every major city in all the realms of Duridim. Their conversation pointed toward the Alkari and the training houses in Skaroth, and Lady Iskar led them over to Alandar, who stood near the raised table in the hall. Tuara had always felt short for a high elf. Standing next to Alandar, she felt like a child. He could probably lift her with one hand and throw her across the room, if he wanted to. The thought prompted a question. Lady Iskar, do the Alkari really have no souls, as I have been told? They have no will of their own, or personality besides that which is trained into them? The High Lady looked at her pleasantly, no sign of deception or antagonism at the question. Truly, my dear princess. She led Tuara closer to Alandar, and the large Alkari looked down at her. Tuara shuddered at his eyes. They were of vibrant lavender, yet seemed to hold no life in them, no curiosity, no knowledge. They seemed to simply see what was in front of them, and nothing more. Only when Alandar's eyes shifted to Lady Iskar did they change. They filled with adoration. This, too, was disconcerting, as there seemed to be nothing there except adoration. Lady Iskar continued speaking as Tuara took this in. The Alkari are magnificent creatures. They are beautiful specimens, nearly perfect in physical form, and able to learn just as easily as sentient beings. They even have different aptitudes. Some, similar to our lovely Alandar here, learn many things very well, while others are given to learn only very specific tasks. Just as with you or I, additional skills may be learned. But we are naturally good with some things, yet not with others. So it is with the Alkari. Yet they can only learn by instruction. If we were to walk out of this room and leave Alandar here, he would never leave of his own volition. He would eat the food that is here when his body became hungry enough. But once it was gone, he would simply be here until finally he would die. They are strange creatures, so beautiful, so perfect, yet they lack any ability to act on their own. The goddess has given them to us in this manner to be the perfect source of pleasure and service. They will never fight against us. They will never rebel. They will never turn and injure us. This is why we worship them, and worship the goddess who has given them to us. While they serve us, we love them and train them to be perfect companions, warriors, and assistants in whatever capacity they can be to our people. Tuara listened to the High Lady enthralled. Alkari worked in the western mines of Cuvia and in her own province of Avalonia, yet she knew nothing about them. Truly, standing next to Alandar, was the closest she had ever been to personally interacting with one of them. "May I ask another question, High Lady?" Tuara inquired. "Of course, my dear princess. I will answer any question I am able to. I do love interacting with the truly curious, especially those who are genuine, and love to learn the way I can see you do." Tuara blushed at the High Lady's insightfulness. It was no wonder she had accomplished so much in her life. "I understand Alandar is the only gladiator here today who is not for sale." "That is correct, my dear. He has additional training yet that we wish him to experience. He will travel with our dear Aiden and my own retinue of retainers to the Samunis Monastery in Adamar. It is a secluded location, far into the western Duvian mountain range." Tuara felt a flare of excitement at the mention of Samunis. They were sending Alandar to the very location her mother had gone to discover answers and to resolve whatever secret she had kept concerning Tuara. Another piece to the puzzle? Perhaps if she had the chance, she could inquire about what types of things were taught there. "That is what my question is about. I heard that he would be sent away for more training. Why send him to Adamar? Surely any knowledge there can be found in Perome." Lady Iskar gave Tuara a kindly smile. "Quite the contrary, my dear. We have pushed Alandar's physical limits to the very brink. I do not think there is a skill he cannot master. We are now trying to push the limits of his mind. There are few places in all the realms where ideas are the focus. This is why we want him to go to Samunas. The ancient ones there push their minds. They study histories that have long been forgotten, the texts that are older than the cities or realms of Duradim. They consider what once was and ponder on what may be. This is why we will send him for his final lessons, to discover whether he can grasp the depths of thinking that most of us never even consider. Not only comprehend, but offer insight. Perhaps through Alandar we may understand more of the gods and the gift of the Alkari the goddess has given us." Tuara nodded, considering the High Lady's words. To understand the gods and their gifts, it was a rather noble pursuit. She did not believe in the Separan gods, nor in their goddess, yet she could not fault the High Lady for trying to deepen her own understanding of things. She would go to Samunas herself, if she had a way. "I thank you for your insights and indulgence, High Lady," Tuara said. "I hope I have sufficiently answered your questions, dear princess, and perhaps invoked even deeper curiosities in your ample mind." Again, Tuara felt a blush at the High Lady's praise. "If you will excuse me," Lady Iskar said, "the negotiations appear to be ending. I must speak with the guildmasters before all is done. Peace be upon you all." Tuara curtsied to the High Lady. "Peace be upon you, High Lady. Go in good spirits," she replied, echoed by Athandra and Graythan. Tuara was shocked to realize she had forgotten Graythan and Athandra were even with her. "She is quite remarkable, don't you think?" Graythan asked as the High Lady walked away. "If she were a high elf rather than a human, I might pursue her." A loud laugh burst from Tuara, and she clapped a hand over her mouth, embarrassed at the heads that turned her way. There was a tinkling sound like a bell from near the front table, and the conversations in the room quieted. Narvas stood near the table, tapping a knife against a silver goblet. "My friends, the evening is coming to a close." He looked around the room with a pleasant smile on his face. "I have enjoyed our time together, and am most grateful for our host, Vice Chairman Duran, and his household for his wonderful accommodations." Applause and shouts of "Hear, hear" followed Narvash's words. "I also express gratitude for my dear companion, Master Elisar Bertrand, for the fine selection of cuisine, our near poisoning notwithstanding." Again applause followed, this time accompanied by laughter. Cyrus, standing next to Aiden, clapped him on the back good-naturedly at the comment. "And now, my friends, we will retire for the evening. For those of you who have made purchase contracts this evening, your house guild attendants will participate in a private ceremony with your new gladiators to thank the goddess for the gifts she has given. And now, my friends, peace be upon you all." A final round of applause followed, and Tawara felt a kindling of excitement. She had an idea of what exactly Narvash meant when he said there would be a private ceremony with the Alkari gladiators. She looked at Athandra, who apparently had read Tawara's mind. Athandra's eyes were wide, and she shook her head, mouthing the word "no." Tawara grinned, nodding back, her lips forming the word "yes." Ba, ba, ba.
All right, so a little insight into Alandar's special lineage and
A little bit of what he's got going on there, and some background into the Alkari, the Trade Guild, the gladiators,
the fish.
the fish. Yes. Was I'm trying to remember if was Aiden originally the one who choked on the fish, the spicy fish,
Yeah, I think he was.
or was it somebody else? Or we changed something about that,
I don't remember now.
and we talked about, we were like, should that really be in there? And then we were like, yes, it should. Like, our book is about characters. We want you to know the people.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. That I don't remember us changing the character, but the fish we definitely. It's akin to wasabi is basically what we were.
Yeah, something
Going
like
for.
that. The Paramese version of wasabi, or maybe it is wasabi. Cordova is just Burundian for wasabi. Any of these chapters, though, it was fun. It's fun to write characters. You know, when you're getting into trying to express their personality and the experiences that they have, it's fun to put that in there and see them develop over time. You know, like writing each of these characters, I have an image in my brain of who they are, and but over time, it's like, oh, look, they're growing up. They're off to school with you.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and they continue to grow, and you know we're working on book 2 now.
Yeah.
And it's nice to look back, you know, as we reread this for the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where that person started.
Yeah.
Here's where and now we know where they are now.
Right where we're editing right now in book 2, I wish we could talk about it right now, but we're not going to spoil it for you. But what we're going through right now with editing, and some of the things our characters are experiencing that will drive fundamental change in multiples of the characters that we've had in the book so far, that are going to play little pieces. So like there's going to be there's experiences that are happening to them right now in book 2 are going to fundamentally change how they see themselves, what they think about themselves, what they think about life, their outlook on things, their perspective on the world around them. And that's true for like I'm specifically thinking of the chapter we most recently were working in. It's true for Tawara. It's true for Athandra. And then we go back to chapters we've already been working on, and it's like we're going to see definitive change, perspectives on things. Captain Ethrin, even Lieutenant Bernard.
Yeah. Has he even come up yet?
Yeah, we already have written interactions. Yeah, he was. He was in book 1.
Yeah.
The lieutenant, the jerk face.
Yep.
But in book 2, you're going to get to know Lieutenant Bernard more.
Yeah. So book 1, a lot of introductions.
Yeah.
Book 2, those individual pieces are going to evolve into actual characters.
Yeah. Yeah, we have, I mean, our story itself, we've already talked about. Our story is character heavy, not just breadth of characters, but we want, we like, I enjoy characters. I started reading again, well, listening to. I cycle back through books when I uh, run out of credits. I need to get a, well, I'm limited because of the county that I live in, being able to use the library
Yeah.
audiobook library that's available. So I'll go back through and listen to books in my Audible library. I started listening to The Wheel of Time again. And I'm like, right out the gate, getting to know Rand and Matt and Perrin and Egwene and Tam. And I'm like, the characters, the plot is exciting, and it's exciting right from the beginning, and I enjoy that. Ours is a slower,
Yeah.
slower introduction, slower build up, but it's still like, if people complain, you get a little later in Robert Jordan's books, and they're like, "Oh, the slog," and I'm like, "Well, I wouldn't have enjoyed the books as much if he'd have just raced through and skipped over all of the character stuff. I would be okay with him not re-describing things.
Yeah.
I do not like, in our books, you will not get re-descriptions. If you don't remember what it was from book one, you're just going to have to go back and reread book one, because unless it's absolutely critical and somebody is like, a character is re-explaining it, I'm not rehashing stuff.
No, we don't.
There's not going to be, oh, remember we introduced this character in book. Nope. They're there. They were introduced. Hopefully you remember them, because I'm not rehashing, because it drives me bananas. I don't like it. We talked. I don't know if we talked about that on the podcast at all, but you and I have talked about that before. Of,
I don't mind some, but I like it to be contextual. Like,
yes,
if you need to bring back, or if you want to remind your readers, do it in a way that's like, okay, well, this character wasn't there before, so somebody needs to explain it to them.
Yeah.
Or, and in that way you can bring it back without out of context rehashing.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. If I'm reading or if I'm listening on audio, if there's a description, and once it happens once or twice where I'm listening to or reading a series of books, once I pick up on, oh, they're re-describing something I've already read, and they're not like giving me a new perspective, or it's not that here's a contextual take on something that we've already described, and in order to put it in this new context, you need to get some of that description again. It's not that. It's just, it's kind of like you get a description of what the one power is, that there's a male and female half of the one power, what the one power does, the different ways that the one power is used, the different elements of, of fire and air and spirit, and the different elements of the one power. You get that in book one, and then again in book two, same description, and then again in book three, and again in book four, and it's all the way up through like book five, where he's still re-describing the same thing, not putting it into some new context, but it's just, oh, hey reader, this is what the one power is. And I'm like, stop telling me that. I already know. So I'll literally, if I'm reading, I'll be like, re-describing, okay, and I just flip. Because literally sometimes it's like 3 pages where I'm like, I already know this, don't care, I already know all this, stop telling me it again.
Yeah.
And on audiobook, I'll be like, skip 30 seconds, nope, still skip, I still know that, skip, still know that, skip, okay, now I'm to new content.
Yeah, it can get laborious, especially, if you're new to the series and it comes back up in the second book, okay, maybe even maybe not the third book, maybe the fourth book redescribed a few things you might have forgotten. But
Yeah.
when you get into that series and you're 8-9 books into it, you're like, I don't need to be told this again because it's contextually through the whole book.
Yeah, that's a big thing that I was just thinking of within the Wheel of Time specifically. The whole thing about the Wheel of Time, book 1, is the one power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it is, like, if the one power didn't exist and there weren't Aes Sedai and they didn't wield the one power, the story wouldn't exist.
Right.
The whole story is about discovering this thing. It's everywhere throughout book 1. If you don't know that, what it is when you read book 2, like, sorry, you should have read. If you read book 1 and you didn't get that,
you should read book 1.
You didn't actually read book 1. Or after you read book 1, a mule kicked you in the head. Like, so to describe again, oh, and by the way, the one power is this, like, oh my gosh. It's literally, every few pages of the book, there's something about the one power because it is the fundamental premise of the whole story. So, yeah, there's a couple books I've read. One series that I've read that was literally like redescribing characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm 4 books in and you're describing this character, and each book was episodic, but it also carried forward the overarching story from the previous book. And they literally, when that character came into the book,
Mm-hmm.
like, you describe the character in book 1, then this character comes on scene in book 2. And I went back and looked. They literally, the author who wrote this, went back, copied the description from book 1 verbatim and pasted it into book 2.
Yeah.
Then they went back and copied it and pasted it into book 3. And then they copied and pasted it into book 4. And they did that with every character that comes on scene. Like a paragraph or 2 of description of this person, including like some background stuff. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me?
Yeah, you don't need that.
One, you don't need it, and 2, it's so non-contextual when you're not redescribing it in your own words. You just copied verbatim and pasted it here and here and here and here and here in your books. I'm like, oh.
I don't think we ever redescribed character. If you didn't pick it up the first time, you're going to have to reread it.
Yeah.
Because
Let your imagination imagine the character however they are.
Yeah.
If you missed what a room looks like, maybe you have to reimagine it till we come back to it again. But there'll be some things, like you said, contextually, if something is important to what's happening at the time,
yeah,
there's a reason that panel in that mosaic window is blue. When we describe it, and then we're going to go, oh, the blue light coming in, and it's shown on the floor. And there was, the moon shining through the blue light was at the perfect time of year that it shone on the stone and illuminated this special text that showed up. Well, that's good to know. Remember that blue panel? It's important.
Yeah.
So we're going to tell you about it again.
But there are ways of doing it. Like I said, for example, I have another character there that wasn't there before, that you need to explain it to that character.
Yeah.
Or maybe that character seeing, if you're in a different character's perspective, that character seeing it for the first time.
So exactly what you just said, there's been some books that I've read where, we're not perfect writers. As we're reading, I'm like, oh, I really enjoy our writing, but also like this sentence, we could have made it better. That could have been better. And sometimes as I'm reading it out loud, I'm like, oh, we read this out loud before, but now that I'm reading it out loud again, I'm like, oh, we could have said this in this way and it would have been better, you
Yeah.
know. Um, so we're not we're not perfect in our writing. We don't claim to be in any way. But I will say there are some authors who kind of restate some stuff and they're redescribing, and I'm like, oh, you're so close. You were in the character's perspective and you had the opportunity to re-describe whatever it was, but from the character's perspective. So now we get insight from the character
Mm-hmm.
and it comes out as dialogue, and we get to see, well, here's what the room looks like, but also this is what it looks like how they observe it. And instead of staying like in this dialogue where they're talking about whatever it is that's being redescribed, the author will like step out and be like, and now the narrator will interject and describe to you in 3 sentences what this person is talking about. And I'm like, oh, it could have been fine if you just let them tell it instead of you
Yeah.
stepping back and then being like, oh, dear reader, let me remind you. Like, don't
Yeah.
remind me. Bad author.
Yeah. That's something we don't do. We don't step out of the characters.
Yeah.
And
We try hard
well,
not to.
yeah, we try hard not to.
There's a little bit of pullback occasionally, but we try to keep everything within the characters' heads. But it's difficult to do that all the time. So Robert Jordan didn't do that, and I still love his writing. Still love The Wheel of Time. So it's not a hard, it's not something you have to do, but it is something we actively attempt to do
Yeah.
as much as possible. That anything that is observed from the perspective of our characters. But it'd be hard, the Wheel of Time of a wind rose from the mountains of mist. It was not the beginning, but it was a beginning,
Yeah.
Like, well, Rand didn't know that when
Yeah.
wind started in the mountains of mist and swirled the fog. And that it brushed across the plains and fluttered these flags on, before it hit him when he's herding his sheep.
Yeah.
So just if you are a writer, of course, this is my opinion. Jared, you have an opinion.
I like things to be through the character's eyes. I don't mind being told things,
Yeah.
But I would prefer to see it through the character's eyes. Find a way. And like you said, there are times when you can't, like the winds and whatever. But if it can be told through the character's eyes, how the character sees it,
Yeah.
I'd much rather, because then I feel more like I am that character.
Yeah. And with that, I picture stuff happening like in a movie scene where we're going to follow main character A and we're going to zoom in until the whole story we're following that character, or at least that, the couple scenes with that character, we're only going to see what this character sees scene to scene to scene. We're only going to experience what they experience. We're going to ride along on their shoulder, so to speak, or, there's a GoPro hanging above their head. We're going to follow along everything that happens with them. If they don't see it and they don't experience it, we as viewers in those scenes, we don't view and experience it. But sometimes the camera is, sometimes the camera is way back on the mountains and it's filming across the trees and this beautiful mountain scene and all these, snow peaks up in the background. And then you get closer and the mountains get more green and there's trees. And then here's a big hill that's all grass covered. And then you zoom in on the hill that's all grass covered. And standing on top of the hill is this strawberry blonde with her hands outstretched, and she's twirling and singing, "The hills are alive with the sound of music," And now you got to experience the whole scene as you zoomed into, now we're at Maria on the hilltop singing about the hills.
Yeah.
But it took us, we didn't start in Maria's head and then be like, okay, here's Maria. Now let's jump back and describe all these things that Maria has. They're way out there in the middle of nowhere. I'm okay with that from a writing perspective too. Of we're taking this broad paintbrush and painting this scene of all the things. It could be a battle scene, this battle that's raging and people fighting and dying and cannons firing and legs getting ripped off and horses screaming and running off the battlefield as we zoom in, and there's clashing of swords and bayonets and musket fire until we get to John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith, who is fighting with someone else who's like, that's my name too.
Yeah, but when you do that, once you get into detail of what's moving plot forward, you're back into the character.
Yeah.
You know,
But
you
it's
can set a scene,
yeah.
but that's different than trying to move the plot along.
Yeah. And I think setting those scenes, like going from one scene to another scene to another scene, sometimes you start the scene with both John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith's sword fighting right there, and you're right there with him. Sometimes you start the scene, like I said, from way back here, and you zoom in, and the next scene you start from way back here, and then you zoom in, and it's a ship, and until you get through the stormy seas and the ship in the distance, and as you zoom in on the ship, and it's tossing in the waves, and there's Captain John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith, and he's at the helm, and he's like, I'm gonna get the guy who took my name.
Yeah. It works. That works better cinematically too than it does.
But that is the wheel of time, where it always starts with there was a wind rose, and it leads you through and plays out, across. It could be across armies, it could be across desert, it could be across whatever, until the wind leads you into, you get the broader picture of the scene of this tower, and two people are fighting on the tower, and then the wind pushed against Rand and shoved him, like the wind was pushing him against the tip of the practice sword, as though it was actually trying to drive the sword into him. But you get all of this actual scene as you zoom in until you get Rand and Lan practicing on top of the tower when they're up in the borderlands.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so you can write these scenes that zoom. I mean, we do that with when the horse Tawara leaves on her horse ride, and that next chapter on a morning ride.
Yeah.
That we get the cobblestones and the horse and the wind, horse in the wind and the brush and the trees, and the bushes and the gate, until we're at, and it's Tawara on horseback, and we just painted this scene without telling you it's Tawara till we're ready to say zoom in now, and we followed the horse's feet, and we followed all this other stuff, and the camera falls on Tawara.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we do it, but we don't do it as much, I guess.
Yeah. There's some where it pulls back and forth, where we describe a room until we zoom in on whoever's in the room.
Yeah.
It's kind of setting that scene, giving the ambiance before we get into the character's head. And once we're there, then it's all this stuff from their perspective. But some people may not like that. Like I said, it doesn't mean it has to happen that way. It just means that's the way I like it.
Yeah. I mean, I've read plenty of stuff where it's pulled back. It's not, you get the character's perspective, but then you get the omniscient narrator or the character as narrator.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I've read a lot of different books. There are books that I read that I still enjoy the reading, even though it's a different perspective. It's just how well is it done?
Yeah. Yeah. The only way I don't like it is character hopping, head hopping.
Yeah.
That, if you need to show me a different perspective,
give me a break.
Yeah.
In there somewhere. Let me know. We're switching. Something's changing. The dynamic is going to be different now.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm not a fan of.
It's just so hard to follow.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard enough. There even some of our writing, even where um, I start reading in one voice, and we've had to switch it up some. Where as we've gone back and been like, wait a minute, I thought it was this person's voice coming in. We need to put that so and so said this
Yeah.
toward the
Well, we did that
beginning.
just recently on a chapter we worked on.
Yeah.
Because we got into it and we're 3 paragraphs in, and I thought it was
Yeah.
this character, and it's not. It's that character, and
Yeah.
but it was. And what makes it frustrating is that's so easy to fix.
Yeah.
Why don't people?
Yeah.
you
Well,
know-
it's still. I mean, reading our book out loud right now, it's still not perfect.
no,
You know,
we're getting better.
like sometimes when it's dialogue, and the dialogue continues, and then a third person comes in. Sometimes we start with the quotes rather than the person's name,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, it's not always real straightforward to put the person's name at the beginning, but you know, it makes it so that, especially while I'm reading and I'm trying to give different different
Accents
and voices and stuff, I have to like let my eyes try to take a quick sneak ahead to be like, okay, this is going to be Graythan, so I got to do it in Graythan's voice, or here's Bertrand coming up, or Narvash, or whatever. You know, I'm only doing some voices, not everything,
Yeah,
but
enough
still,
enough to notice the difference in the cultures. I guess is
yeah.
which is better than I usually do in my own head.
I don't know. I could just read it all straight through, but I like it. And if nobody else does, too bad. You could go buy the book and read it, and then you don't have to listen to my voice. You can put whatever accent you want. So there's some thoughts for you today. Just some thoughts on if you're a writer, or if if you read books. What styles do you like? Do you like rehashing? Does it bother you? Does it annoy you the way that it annoys me? One other thing, real quick, that we found recently that my dear brother Caleb shared with us is our book is in a library.
Yes, it is. We don't know where.
But we just have a
Exactly.
picture.
We know it's somewhere in Arkansas.
Yes.
I would assume northwest Arkansas.
I would assume. But somewhere out there beneath the pale moonlight, someone's thinking of me and loving me tonight. Wait, that's wrong verse. Yeah, so cool. Got the text and we're like, both of us. So Caleb sent me a picture and said, my friend sent me this from a library in Arkansas today. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's a
Little
picture of
bookshelf.
books on the wall.
Then I showed Jared and I'm like, hey, look at this. And he was like, what am I looking at? And I'm like, it's in the library in Arkansas. And then he's looking and he's like, am I missing something?
Well, and the dumb thing is I knew what I was looking for. I was looking for our book. I was like, obviously this is going to be our book somewhere. And it's right in the middle.
Yeah, right smack in the middle.
I just didn't see it.
Then his face was like, ha ha, big grin. And I'm like, we're in a library. So, I don't know. I don't know how big an accomplishment that is, but I think it's pretty cool.
Hey, I think it's pretty cool too.
Yeah. So, if wherever you live, there isn't a copy of our book in your local library, you should go order a copy and take it down and be like, hey, library, I want to donate this copy.
Or I know some libraries have where you can just request.
Yeah.
You can request titles and they will add them to the catalog.
So try that first. Go, if your local library doesn't have our book, go request it. And if they say, well, we don't do requests, then go buy it and take it in and be like, I wanted to donate this to you.
Yes.
There's another option for you.
And just before we go, one little thing, because of the people I know that listen to our podcast, somebody will bring up that you said John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith, and it's Schmidt.
Is it Schmidt?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt?
Yeah.
I'm going to look that up. I don't
I
believe
did
you.
look it up.
I've always said Smith.
I've always heard Schmidt, and you said Smith, and I'm like, wait a minute. So I looked it up. Yeah, it's Schmidt.
I'm going to have to rewatch Rocket Man when he's in the isolation chamber and he's like, John Jacob Jingleheimer Smith. I'm going to have to listen and see, did he say Schmidt or did he say Smith?
No, officially, it's Schmidt.
Gosh dang it. They're wrong. They're officially wrong. Okay. I'll have to look that up and see. So, if I remember, I'll look it up and we will report back next time. We'll see if there's another perspective on that.
All right.
Until then, go in good spirits. Thanks for listening to the Creators Guild podcast. Don't forget to get your copy of A Flight from Shadows, available on Amazon. While you're there, please rate it and give it a review. If you like the Creators Guild, please like and subscribe, and make sure to share it with your friends. Until next time, go in good spirits.